Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and him, Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. I don't know whether I said university bad enough to retake that, Kieran, but our listeners know us well enough to go to they will guess that that word I was grasping for was university. It's questions day, Kieran. We're going to get straight into them. No big lead up, no joking about football, because we've got a lot of questions, good questions, and we have a couple of news stories as well, Kieran. So we really haven't got time to discuss our team's relative performances yesterday, but we really haven't. But the big story, of course, is Cristiano Ronaldo, who I imagine must have been very impressed with the way Palace came back in the second half on Saturday. He won't be looking forward to playing us this season. I was trying to find a way of crowbarring it in. I thought, we'll get it undone at the start. Kieran, I assumed, like everybody, when I saw the headline, Ronaldo coming to Manchester, that he was coming to City. So what are the finances behind the move back to Man United?
Well, I think it's been fairly public that he'd grown unhappy at Juventus, and I think they were quite happy to move him off the wage bill as well.
Right.
Manchester City, following the issues with Harry Kane, were willing to buy him, but didn't particularly want to pay a fee because he's not exactly a Manchester City style player.
No.
He is. He sees himself as a Galactico, and Manchester City. I always think that Manchester City is a bit like the Borg in Star Trek. Resistance is futile. They lose one player and somebody else comes in from the squad who is equally as good. And people are saying they've not got a centre forward, but they've just won their last two home games 5-0. So I think they were certainly interested. And then Manchester United got wind of this, and Manchester United are willing to pay 15 million euros plus 8 million in bonuses, presumably linked to winning the Premier League and the Champions League. So the total cost will be up to 23 million euro for Juventus, plus the wages, which are going to be the thick end of £500,000 a week. But if you took a look at Manchester United's share price on the day of the deal, which of course I did, that shot up. As it was announced, the value of Manchester United as a business had increased by $300 million in an afternoon. So that's the Cristiano Ronaldo effect. Why is that? Well, first of all, we've got to dispel the shirt sale myth. Will they sell some more shirts? Yes. Will they be significant in number? Probably not, because if you're a Manchester United fan, you've already bought this season's shirt, and you've already got Pogba or Sancho or McTominay or whoever is your favourite player on. So I can't see that many people going out to buy a second shirt. But from a commercial partner's point of view, what Manchester United will now be able to do is to say, okay, we've got a 3-year deal. We can offer you Fred. We can offer you. We can offer you Phil Jones for the regular price. Alternatively, if you want CR7, it's going to cost you an extra $500,000, an extra $1 here. So they will recover the money and more from the recruitment cost of the player.
He's what now, 35, 36?
He's 36.
36. So will his wages reflect that, or is Cristiano Ronaldo, it doesn't matter how old he is, you pay what you're told to pay?
Yeah, I mean, I think he will have negotiated, or his advisors will have negotiated. I can remember when, probably the same as you, when I was 36 and playing park football, my powers were beginning to wane in the Manchester Accountants Sunday League Division 2, but he doesn't seem to be tapering off. So I think he'll be able to extract a very considerable sum from Manchester United, especially on the back that the transfer fee itself is relatively low. And that's what clubs look at. What is the total cost over the 2 years? When they recruited Ibrahimovic, that was on a Bosman, so he was paid a huge wage to reflect the fact, the ultimate is the total cost is wages plus amortization.
Yeah. Also, the thing is as well, it's like when Mourinho came, it's like every away game's going to sell out now because I want to see Ronaldo play again. Basically, I'm also, I don't know whether I'm depressed or impressed by the fact that Manchester had enough accountants to have a Division 2.
Oh yeah, we had three. We had Premier, first and second.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Good Lord, the halftime discussions must have been amazing.
Yeah, and you can imagine the tables were always up to date very quickly.
I imagine so, yeah. I imagine everyone knew the price of the oranges at halftime as well, didn't they? Yeah, but I imagine you probably had to wait to seasonally adjust the tables at the end, did you? Birmingham City have advertised a job for a 12-month placement in their media department, but it's unpaid, which suggests to me that they have produced a guy in charge of recruitment.
Yes, and this is, I'm not picking on Birmingham here, but I sort of have a routine that I go through each day, which is, I wake up, I read The Athletic for stories, I read The Times and The Telegraph and the FT, and then twice a week I go to a website called Jobs in Football, just to see what's coming through. And this is it's an unpaid internship for 12 months, but you do get a bus pass for West Midlands Transport. But my concern is the very fact that it is unpaid, because that immediately is restricting the potential talent pool. Absolutely. Because unless you've got a family who can afford to subsidise you for that 12 months, then you've got to struggle. I mean, Hull City, they have an internship for broadly the same period. Now it's paying, it's paying effectively what they call an academy rate, or £4.62 an hour, which is pretty appalling. But it's still £4.62 an hour more than Birmingham City are offering. My concern here is there are an awful lot of people who want to work in the football industry. Yeah. It has a limited number of jobs. And, is the industry leveraging off this? And I'll be honest, it's not the only industry that does it. I'm perfectly aware that there are media companies that do similar things. And I'm sure you work in the world of entertainment. You must know that some media organisations that they'll do similar things, which are, in my view, exploiting young people's desire to get on in life, and to have the potential. So, I don't think it's great by Birmingham. I know the club's losing money, but it still has a very considerable wage bill overall. To pay somebody minimum wage isn't a huge ask.
Yeah, they could also apply for your course that's coming up as well, which we'll be hearing more about later on. It's an interesting one, Kieran, because newspapers, for example, won't be able to report this story critically because they rely on unpaid internments. And as you say, my industry, it's been to the shame of the television industry in the past 20 years that entry-level runners, for example, who are basically gophers, don't get paid anything. They might get paid travel expenses, which is of course the reason why most of them are from middle class and upper class backgrounds. It's only recently, and the company that Richard Osman helps to run, Zepatron, were one of the first to recognise that in London in particular, a vast talent pool was being missed because 90% of the people of London, the young people, can't afford to work for nothing. Yeah. So they do have paid interns, and it's shameful that not every media company does the same thing. So it isn't just media, as you say, but you can't help thinking, and Birmingham City are a club that we both like, and we know they've had their issues, but it's good that they're offering it. But I know Birmingham as well as any other city. My mother-in-law is in Birmingham. I spend a lot of time there. And there's not a lot of money in Birmingham, apart from one or two areas. It's a deprived city, and it's not right that really the only people that can afford to take up this offer are people whose parents will subsidise them or who have money enough already. So it'd be interesting to hear from Birmingham City on that. I would suggest that Guy gets in touch with them, but of course he's exploiting us in a similar way. So he probably would get in touch with them to find out how it is they're getting away with paying nothing when he has to pay expenses. And To no one's surprise, Kieran, especially not to yours, a former FIFA official has pleaded guilty to a racketeering conspiracy.
Yes, this was a story which I read in the New York Times, and for those of you that like that type of thing, I would very much encourage you to follow Tariq Panja on Twitter. He's always good for stories of slightly offbeat nature such as these. This is quite incredible. It could be that FIFA could end up receiving up to $200 million from former officials. There's 50 who have been accused. A few have now conceded, and this is mainly to do with Central and South American and Caribbean entities such as CONCACAF and CONMEBOL. And I used to teach in Trinidad, and
Jack Warner.
I'm Jack Warner.
Yeah.
I mean, the stories I could tell you about Jack Warner, unfortunately, I can't tell you about Jack Warner. But I think people can probably fill in the gaps. It wasn't particularly very well reflecting of his tenureship there. But this is credit due here to the US Justice Department, who have investigated some of the natures of what's been going on. FIFA are sort of they're trying to claim to be coming out of this as the ruined party, the innocent party, and Infantino is really selling we're all good now. All of those naughty people, those 50 plus officials who were indicted by the US Justice Department, they're not part of us anymore. Although when you do a wee bit more digging, and I'm looking at you particularly here, Marco Polo Del Nero, who was the Brazilian representative who was barred for life by FIFA, but appears to be sort of still have significant influence over Brazilian football. He's a bit like Grouty in Porridge. He's supposed to be inside. He's supposed to be suffering some form of punishment from the long arm and the law, but is still able to emit a degree of control.
Yeah, so I can't remember. I meant to look it up. I was too busy looking up other stuff, as you'll find out later. I was very easily distracted during the pod today, mainly because I had a hangover from being in the East End for too long yesterday. Hackney Wick's changed, I believe. There's an American FIFA delegate who looked like Father Christmas, who was the
Chuck
one.
Blazer. Chuck Blazer.
Chuck Blazer's the one who. The US authorities, to their credit, once the US authorities get their teeth into a problem, they don't let it go. And it seemed like the whole world. That's why I introduced this story by saying to no one's surprise, because it seemed like the whole world knew the corrupt people in FIFA, except the people in FIFA. So it's very interesting that Infantino still thinks that we believe that there's no corruption involved. The trouble is there's too much money that's involved for there not to be corruption, really. So, again, this is a story we'll keep our eye on. But let's go to questions, Kieran, because we have some very good questions, as ever. And the first one comes from Mike Gill. And Mike Gill says, now football is getting back to normal, please God, again with crowds. What are the prospects of the iFollow service for EFL games continuing? Personally, says Mike, I will go to all home games and local away matches, but would willingly pay to watch the rest on stream. Now, that would be £10 extra revenue to the club with minimum costs, presumably as cameras would be filming anyway. So what do you reckon the chances are that it will continue, Kieran?
Well, I think a lot depends here on Sky's relationship with the EFL, because as somebody a bit like you, who's football mad, if there's a full program of EFL matches on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, I'm there. Sky, I'm there with Jeff Stelling and the mob, and the Sky coverage of what's happening in the EFL is fantastic as they go from match to match. I think there is an iFollow sort of audio package available, and the Papa John's matches you can get for £10 a match. The individual matches is a slightly more complicated because there's quite a few clubs who have opted out of iFollow. They're trying to do their own arrangements. When it comes to international coverage, I think there is some sort of equivalent of iFollow, but that works out relatively cheaply. Looking at that from country to country, but the EFL website, and I'm trying not to be critical of the EFL here, isn't the easiest to navigate. So I was trying to look at it, if I was a Crawley Town supporter or something like that, how could I do it? And it didn't lend itself to finding out the system particularly straightforwardly.
Okay. Well, Mike, we will try and do some research on that and find out for you. In the meantime, controversially, I will say Jeff Stelling, what a brilliant broadcaster he is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Very, very good broadcaster and much funnier than the people around him, which is, I just love the expression he gets on the face when no one gets his convoluted puns. So Paul Merson looks at him blankly. Now, our next question, Kieran, comes from, you wouldn't think a simple collection of 4 letters would cause me as much problems as GNAN has caused me, because I like to pronounce people's names properly, so I've been on all sorts of... This question comes from Julian Ganan. I'm going for that.
Yeah, I'll go for that. Yeah,
that's what Wiki told me. This very confused sounding woman told me to say. I have been able to discover that it is apparently the 981st most common surname in the world. The 981st, is that right? Yeah, most common surname in the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's how distracted I've been doing this. Although, to be fair, the website that I went to had no information on the surnames Day or Maguire. So I'm not entirely sure how respectful. I'm used to people saying Maguire. No, say nothing, mate. We ain't giving you any information.
Yeah, but anyway, nobody likes to snitch.
But Julian Ganan, and I hope I've pronounced that Julian properly. Julian says he's been working in the sport and football industry for many years, sponsorship, marketing, etc., and has now started teaching a class on corporate social responsibility at his old university. While there are many great examples, says Julian, as you've mentioned on your pod, such as Forest Green Rovers or foundations and social projects run by clubs, I wonder how much clubs in England and abroad, if Kieran has these numbers, actually spend on social activities, and if the clubs financially have any advantages, such as tax deductions regarding FFP or similar. Are these figures that you can isolate, Kieran, from club accounts?
Well, what I did do is I took a look at a couple. So, if as you know, in my opinion, and it's other opinions are of course available, the best community corporate social responsibility project in the country is run by Everton Football Club.
Yeah,
and Everton in the community generates around about £5 million a year. Now that's from grants, so it works on projects with the likes of the Home Office, with the local authorities, donations, fundraising, which has really been hit terribly by COVID, because sometimes if you can get the manager to turn up to an event or you arrange a charity match with some club legends, that can really move the dial. But they spend every penny. So all of the money's going on in trying to deal with health projects at all ages, crime relief, education, really positive things, and the value that they get out of this, in terms, for every pound they spend, they get around about £9 of social improvement, and they've got the data to back this up. So they're absolutely amazing at what they do. In terms of the benefits, these type of projects are completely exempt from financial fair play rules. So if one of the club directors wants to put in an extra $100,000, that goes straight in. It doesn't impact upon, there's no negative things from FFP. What I would personally do is that if it could be done, I'd give them 150% exemption. So for every £100 they spend, they get £150 off their FFP bill. So again, to incentivise good behaviour, but they do fantastic work. From a tax point of view, a lot of them will be registered as charities, and therefore they will be. Again, if they're spending 100% of their revenue, they're making no profit, so they're paying no tax. So those are the benefits. But the work that these organisations do, I cannot praise enough.
The difficulty is, Kieran, because as you know, I'm a trustee of Palace for Life, the Crystal Palace FC Foundation, which I will keep mentioning until I get the MBE that has so far, for some reason, eluded me. But even though I'm a trustee, and I said there's still, I find it difficult sometimes to distinguish the grey area between the club and the foundation, because they are separate entities, but of course they overlap. The Venn diagram overlaps in so many ways, and of course, if Palace, God forbid, were to be relegated, we would lose a lot of the money that we were getting through the Premier League, etc. Yeah. But it is quite difficult sometimes to sort out who's doing what, essentially, if you understand what I mean. When someone like you is trying to work out who's spending money on what brilliant project.
Yes, I mean, ultimately, it's coming out of one or other of the organisation's checkbooks, and I think that's the way that we would normally work it out from a financial point of view. So if there is a specific project being run in South London with regards to getting people back into education, for example, then somebody's got to be writing out the check to pay for the wages of the people involved, or for hiring that particular school hall, or for taking these kids to a particular event. And that would form the basis of the calculations for the individual organisation.
Yeah, I should know more about the finances of the trust, Kieran, but as you also know, as I've told you privately, they let me sit out the finance bits. Basically, I'm a middle-aged man, and they basically find me something to do. They just tell me, go and have a look at the pitch for 10 minutes. And I go, oh, great, brilliant. And I'll go and have a look at the trophy cabinet for 30 seconds. Oh, great, brilliant. This episode of The Price of Football is brought to you by The Price of Football online course, hosted by our very own Kieran Maguire. Kieran, tell us more.
Well, Kevin, it's some friends of mine who couldn't afford the Swiss Ramble. So therefore, they decided instead to create the Price of Football course. So it's a 6-week online course starting on the 20th of September. And it's been designed for anybody who wants to potentially get a career in the football industry through a combination of quality education, but also networking. It's really important that you get to know people in the industry because it is a small industry. So it includes 6 hours of weekly study material and a 90-minute mentoring session every week on topics like governing bodies, clubs and investors. I might manage to sneak a bit about amortization in about it as well. So they've asked me to be one of the tutors. So you will see me, or perhaps hear me, or failing that, perhaps they'll see and hear Finlay. And you'll also get the option to attend the World Football Summit in Madrid, though I suspect that will be virtually.
It sounds wonderful, Kieran. It does sound genuinely interesting, and a very good way to launch your career. I also like the fact that you're more likely to be tutored by Finlay than you are by me. If you are listening to this and you'd like to launch your career in the football industry with Kieran, and who better, let's face it, to help launch your career in the football industry, head to www.sportstalentnetwork.com for more information.
And I believe you can get an early bird 50% discount, which is still available. So if you go to www.sportstalentnetwork.com for more info, good luck.
Benjamin Toast is a regular listener.
He is.
And it's again, I can't never not mention his name. I also wonder what happens to Benjamin Toast if he falls off a table. Which side up does he land? Poor Benjamin's at home now going, oh my God, if I had £1 for every time some idiot said that. But Benjamin says loan deals often come with an extra bit on the end that possibly sounds more final than it actually is. What do these terms mean? Contract and cost-wise, do you pay a bit extra to have first dibs on a loan player? And is a transfer fee typically set in advance? And are there some cases where you get an awful player on loan that the manager would like to get rid of, but you are obliged to buy?
Yes, I mean, the nature of a loan deal is that depending upon the player, there could be, first of all, a loan fee. So if we take Philippe Coutinho, Barcelona charged Bayern Munich €9 million for a year of his services, which was quite good. But I think he did quite well for Bayern. Then there will be a wage contribution, which could be anything from, it could be 5 to 10%, or it could be 100% of the wages. So I remember when Wayne Bridge came to Brighton from Manchester City because he was out of favour there. I think we were paying 10% of his wages at the time. Then at the end of the loan deal, there could be one of three things. First of all, the player returns. So this is if he's a young player and he's dropped down a division purely to get development, the chances are it will just be an automatic return to the parent club. Or there could be an option to buy at an agreed fee. And we saw this with Kylian Mbappe in terms of PSG. And this was a way of, should we say, addressing certain financial fair play issues. Or finally, I think the issue that Benjamin was raising, there could be an obligation to buy. And this would be achievement related. So, we at Brighton, we had Anthony Knockaert go on loan to Fulham, and I think that they were obliged to buy him if they were promoted. They were subsequently promoted, and therefore they had to buy him. So it does come down to the small print, and the two clubs will agree this in advance. The benefit it tends to be what you get is a degree of certainty. So, if the player exceeds expectations, you've got the benefit of knowing you can effectively buy him at a bargain price. Unless the opposite happens, is that if you've got an obligation to buy and the player turns out to be a bit of a turkey, and you've ended up with a commitment to pay a fee that at the date when you have to pay it may look a bit high. So, as always, check the small print and make sure that you have very good silver-tongued friends going through that contract on your behalf.
Yes, we've got the problem with Conor Gallagher, who we've had some dreadful players on loan in the past, but Conor Gallagher already, I almost compared him to Attilio Lombardo yesterday, but he's already at that stage where we're going, we want to get in touch with him and say, can you tone it down 10%? Because he's playing so well that Chelsea will inevitably want him back. Because at the moment, he looks like he would get into Chelsea's first team. So already he must have put 10 million quid on his value, because it's hard to get used to seeing young, intelligent, energetic players wearing a Palace shirt. Anyway, Jamie White has a pertinent subject to recent conversations. Jamie White says, with the recent surge in interest around Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, do you expect to see clubs using it to trade? Will we ever see our first one Bitcoin player? Now, this is an area you discussed recently, Kieran, with your new best friend and chess cheat, Gavin. And also, inevitably, if we see our first one Bitcoin player, there will be people going out to see it. Our football's gone for me, some of the Bitcoin. And then in 5 years' time, somebody will go, 2 Bitcoins, that's it. That's football. The bubble's got to burst eventually. But it's an interesting question, Kieran. I mean, I didn't listen to your interview fully because I had the hump that I didn't do it. But I presume this is an area you would have covered with Gavin.
Yeah, my mate Gav.
It's Gav now, is it?
Yeah,
oh,
Gav,
okay, Gav.
yeah.
Great. All right.
Well, we've already had the first Bitcoin transfer.
Right.
This is a Spanish footballer called David Barral, who signed for Spanish third division club Inter Madrid in January.
Inter Madrid,
yes.
Are you sure that's not somebody's fantasy football team name? Inter Madrid, okay, fine.
Yeah, there is an Inter Madrid. And he was 37 years old at the time. So, and I think this was probably linked to the sponsors who were one of these cryptocurrency organizations. So, can it be done? Yes. The people who are extolling the virtues of Bitcoin will say this is the way forwards. I have a huge degree of caution and skepticism when it comes to cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. One of the things we said at the time, it's an unregulated market. It's the equivalent of when if producer Guy starts paying us in price price of football pounds, and you try taking those down the Pawson's arms, there's not a lot you can do with them. So they're not. They can be manipulated in terms of price. They're not a good store of value. They're very volatile. So I'm not the biggest fans of them, but there seems to be a lot of people shouting about them, basically due to something called what we refer to in finance called FOMO, which is fear of missing out. I.e., you buy it because everybody's talking about it. You don't actually know a lot about it, but if you keep shouting about it, then you'll persuade another sucker to buy these things as well. So we have had this first transfer. Could it be a way forward? Possibly. But I would imagine that you don't keep your bitcoins. You transfer them into traditional currencies reasonably quickly to preserve value.
Yeah, the Pawson's Arms has only just got its first card machine. They're not seriously. They're not going to be taking Bitcoin, and the fact they've got a card machine is causing great distress to most people. I asked little John the barman. I said, I need to pay by card because it's the first time I'm ever able to do it. I hear there's a £10 cash limit. Where thereabouts? So a bit. How would you? What would, for those of us who are bamboozled by this, Kieran?
Yeah.
What would one Bitcoin translate to in money, in cash?
So let's say it's 40. Its present price is $40,000 per Bitcoin. So therefore, you could agree, but the trouble is, by next week, it could be worth $50,000, or it could be worth 25, and that's my reservation. That for all that is wrong in the traditional currency markets, and as somebody that likes numbers and likes a bit of finance, I'm fully aware of the weaknesses as well as the strengths. We are not operating in the Weimar Republic where we had hyperinflation. You do broadly know that a pound in a week's time is going to buy you pretty much the same as it bought today. You can't say that with cryptocurrencies. And therefore, if you agree to sell a player for a Bitcoin, by the time the paperwork has gone through, which could be 48 hours later, you could be 20% up, you could be 30% down.
And your point about regulation is an interesting one, because it was just this week, I can't remember if it was the Bank of England or some other responsible authority, said that they didn't have the wherewithal or the time or the capacity to regulate cryptocurrency and new money along with the rest of the financial markets. Is that the case?
That is the case because of the nature of an unregulated market. You and I could genuinely create the price of football coin and try to market it in some way, shape, or form. And how can the Bank of England regulate you, me, but most importantly, producer guy and possibly Finlay?
Well, you could create the price of football coin, Kieran. I'd be happy if that had my face on it. I'd like me on one side, Finlay on the other. That'd be like when people could toss their virtual coin playing virtual games. You say, what, Dog or Kev? Stuart Hatcher has asked one of those questions that I always like, because it's a question that you kind of think we should have discussed before, because it's such a simple concept that I can't believe it hasn't come up. And Stuart Hatcher says, I wanted to ask whether, against the backdrop of relegation clause chat that we've been having recently, is there anything that might prevent a club having contracts in which wages are adjusted according to revenue growth or decline, much like landlords and tenants sometimes agree turnover rents on property? That sounds like a really clever, simple idea, Kieran, doesn't it?
It is. And first of all, hello, Stuart. Because Stuart has very kindly just gone and booked me a table at a pub close to Brentford's new grounds, and I'm meeting him when Brighton play Brentford in a couple of weeks. But that was not linked to him getting his question on the show.
In that case, can I say, I was going to point out that Stuart is a regular social media friend of ours, but as he didn't get in touch with me when Palace played Brentford last week at Selhurst Park, I'm not going to now. He's another one. He's on the Gavin list now. Basically, he's dead to me. He's your friend, Stuart Hatcher, now. All right. So let's answer your friend Stuart Hatcher's question before you go to lunch, before Brentford play Brighton. I hope you enjoy it.
It's a very nice gastropub as well.
I'm sure. I hope you enjoy many a plate of trout and quinoa.
Well, there are performance-related or revenue-related clauses already embedded in contracts because, as we've discussed on a few occasions, for every position further up the Premier League you go, you get an extra £2 million. So an element of this is likely to be embedded into many players' contracts, so that if you finish, first of all, if you finish above 18th, you will get a revenue boost linked to or you'll get a wage boost related to the money from the club. And also, I understand, is that in many players' contracts, their agents are fully aware that finishing 12th instead of 16th is worth an extra £10 million to the club. So therefore, my client is entitled to an element of that. So that there are some. There are certainly tiered payments linked to performance. And it might not be directly linked to revenue, it will be indirectly related to achievements on the pitch, which drive that additional revenue.
Yeah. Talking of gastropubs, I met my old chum, Mark Webster, broadcaster who you know as a West Ham fan. I met him and some friends in a pub in Hackney Wick before the game, and Mark asked for a Chardonnay. I had to point out to him that in the 42 years plus that I've been going to pubs before football games, I'd never, ever asked for a Chardonnay before a football match. Luckily, he wanted a pint. So that was all right. After some discussion, I said I was happy to... unluckily, he had 4 or 5 pints beforehand. Was that Finley coming in at the mention of his name earlier on?
No, he'd be curled up next to me all show.
Oh, is he? Oh, okay. I just thought his ears might have pricked up at the word quinoa. Quinoa? Daddy taking me for a walk? Our next question comes from Nick Andrews Govain. And again, Nick Andrews Govain. I hope I've pronounced the Govain part of that. Nick Andrews Govain says the FA Women's National League was nulled and voided. Null and voided? I was distracted by checking whether null and voided or null and voided was right. But as Nick said, it was null and voided before all other leagues. So what were the financial implications for the clubs, specifically Wolves Women? Now, I listened to Wolves Women pod last week, and I'd say it was very good. I would recommend it to anybody who's interested in women's football. But it's a good question, Kieran, and can we have the answer?
Right. The benefits of having this is that it allows the club to effectively plan for a period in advance. So therefore, it doesn't have to book any coaches. It can put staff on furlough with a degree of certainty. It can cut quite a lot of its potential overheads by saying, for the next 9 months, we're not doing X, Y, and Z. So that would have been the financial benefits of an early voiding of the season. It will simply be a budgetary adjustment with the aim of keeping the club on life support and keeping costs to a minimum.
Okay. Thank you for that, Kieran. Our next question comes from Ed. Sorry, I was gulping my wine then because you answered that question much more quickly than I'm used to.
It wasn't. Was it Chardonnay? Was it?
No, I don't drink Chardonnay. It wasn't the fact it was Chardonnay, Kieran. It was the fact he wanted white wine in a... I was going to describe it as a Hackney boozer, but unfortunately, it probably used to be 20 years ago. It had. I don't approve of pubs having DJs, Kieran. Not live DJs, no. And a choice of 8 ciders. I don't care what farm it comes from. Just give me a pint of cider. I really don't care what breed of apple they are. Do apples have breeds? I don't know.
They have flavours.
I'm a city boy. I don't know types, varieties. That's what varieties. Yeah, I don't care if it's a Cox's or did I ask for a pint of Cox's? No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm so really easily distracted today.
Oh, we've gone down a rabbit hole there.
We totally have. Our next question comes from Ed Henriette. Or if he's Dutch, Henriette. People just put some notes for pronunciation. I just want to get these things right. I'm just worried that there's a club somewhere laughing at my pronunciation of. It's probably not even a foreign name. Anyway, but Ed says, how much do clubs spend on insurance to cover the risk of winning the league or cups that would activate bonuses for players and managers. I've wondered this ever since Sussex County Cricket Club had a surprise success that ended with them making very little profit because they had to pay out on bonuses. It's an interesting question, Kieran. It makes me look forward to the day when Palace announced that their policy of not winning leagues and trophies is actually shrewd financial management.
Yes. Well, a lot will depend upon the club and the risk assessment. So, is it worth Manchester City insuring against not winning the Premier League? That they'd have to pay such a large premium, then that they might as well not bother. So some clubs effectively self-insure because what they've realised is that the additional money that they would receive from prize money from the competition organisers, and secondly the bonuses that they receive from their commercial partners is likely to exceed those wage costs. Having said that, if you were a club such as Leicester City in 2016, you might have taken out a policy, and the chances are you could go to a broker and they'd, when they stopped laughing, at the start of the season, said, "Yeah, we'll give you a very modest premium," and that could have paid off. So it really does depend. The nature of insurance, it's all related to risk, and they do an assessment. Leicester City famously had to go and play Claudio Ranieri. I think it was a £5 million bonus, which he had in his contract. And I remember at the time I'd gone on to about 2 days before they were due to win 2 days before they did win the Premier League. I went on to BBC 5 Live and I was talking about that from a financial point of view, Leicester City would be far better as runners-up of the Premier League, completely taking all of the romance out of the situation and making myself very unpopular with Leicester fans. But then I said, but nobody cares about the financial point of view. Everybody wants Leicester to win, but that bit didn't get picked up. So I got dog's abuse on social media, and rightly so. But it's all risk related. So some clubs will take out a policy if they think that it's a long shot that they're going to win a particular trophy, and they have significant bonuses embedded into contracts. If they are one of the favourites to win the trophy, they are less likely to want to take out the policy because it's going to cost them a fortune in insurance anyway.
It does seem counterintuitive, Kieran, doesn't it, that you need to take out insurance against success. And the idea that success could cost you money, it sort of takes a little bit of the gloss off things, really, doesn't it?
Yes. I still think that Leicester City winning the Premier League was one of the last romantic days in football, from a Premier League perspective. And why anybody was interested in talking about the finances at the time was beyond me. But yes, you're absolutely right. But a football club does consist of more people than the playing staff and the managing staff, and you've got a back office whose job is to manage the risks in relation to successful and unsuccessful aspects of the clubs. Are there insurance policies for the big clubs, and we know who we're talking about? What happens if they don't qualify for the Champions League? Do they get a payout? And if so, what would the premiums be there?
Yeah, I noticed how very cleverly there, Kieran, you blamed 5 Live for asking you the boring question about finance rather than your actual answer of that question. Well done. It wasn't your other new best friend, Colin Murray, was it? No,
it was Adam Parsons, who's now at Sky. Adam's a really good guy.
Oh, you think everyone's a really good guy because you don't drink.
I like everybody.
I know, because you don't drink, that's why. Stuart Barnett is a Leeds fan, and Stuart says, us Leeds fans are seeing some very high-profile people recently wearing Leeds shirts, from LL Cool J to Sugar Ray Leonard, through the auspices probably of Rock Nation. What will this do for the club? Could it increase revenues from overseas fans, making Leeds a worldwide brand, which arguably they already are? To Stuart's list, I would add that Russell Crowe is a Leeds fan, Ardlo Hanlon is a Leeds fan, award-winning theoretical physicist Professor Jim Al-Khalili is a Leeds fan. And just in case you're interested, Kieran, Brighton have got Rag and Bone Man and Sky Sports golf reporter James Haddock.
Rag and Bone Man lives around the corner from me. I see him at the local park with his kid at the local play park.
What, Rag and Bone Man?
Yeah,
intense working class musical artist lives on the same vineyard as you.
It's gone. The pop music's gone, isn't it?
Oh, the pop music's gone. The vineyard, I was going to say, it's like finding out Stormzy doesn't live in Thornton Heath, which he does. Raggy, that's really distressed me. If you told me that Sky Sports golf reporter James Haddock lived on the same vineyard as you, of course he does. He's a golf reporter, not Rag and Bone Man. Good Lord. I'm going to take I'm Only Human. I was going to say I had a Spotify playlist, but I don't. I've got 2 CDs that I have on the go at any one particular time. In case you're wondering, Palace have got everybody, every other celebrity I could mention supports Palace, including Liam Neeson and Paul Weller, which is the coolest one.
Is Paul Weller?
Paul Weller's a Palace fan based on the fact that in one of his the early Jam videos, there's a Palace poster in his bedroom. So we've always extrapolated from that. Because which club doesn't want Paul Weller as a Palace fan? Yeah. Let's face it. It's an interesting. I would argue that Leeds already have a worldwide brand, to be honest, even if it's a hangover from the days of the 70s when they were a huge club, certainly in the UK and in Europe. But, does seeing LL Cool J in a Leeds shirt impact on the club's finances?
Marginally, in the sense that if it does get a bit of notice, let's face it, celebrities wear lots of clothes all the time, and you don't necessarily rush out to go and try to replicate them, but it could move the dial positively. And if you've got a sports retailer, say in the US, who have got a limited amount of space, and they're trying to say, well, we're going to put in 6 Premier League club shirts this season, and you've just seen LL Cool J wearing a Leeds United shirt, you're more likely to say, well, we can link into that. We can show those videos, in the background in the stores. So it can only help in terms of branding, and branding, it does have value. You've only got to look at all the people from Love Island who are, as soon as they walk off that show, they're busy, on Instagram. They've signed contracts with clothing companies and so on, and that seems to work, judging from the reaction that gets. So it can work in their favour. Again, I would stress that this concept of shirt sales being a huge earner for clubs is, in my opinion, overstated. Our Leeds, a big club. And come on, we're big enough to admit that they're bigger than Palace and Brighton, because they have achieved on the international. They've won the Premier League. They've got to the European Cup final, and I think in the days when 99% of the country wanted your representative to win the European Cup, which doesn't necessarily exist these days. So I remember watching that match and getting frustrated, same as the rest of the country. So yes, it can make a difference, but I think these things are overstated in practice.
Yeah, I think we should point out to Angry Not they've won the top league. They won the last Division 1 before the Premier League, didn't they?
Yeah.
Not the
Correct.
League. Yeah, but they're a massive club. I would argue they are a big club. Our final question, Kieran, comes from Thomas Giles, and I'm actually very interested. I'm always interested to hear your answer. Of course, I am. But I would like to find out whether this is a one-off, because Thomas Giles says that Solihull Moors have recently unveiled a competition where companies can win the naming rights to the stadium, worth about £75,000, by entering a competition at a cost of £5,000. Now, those who don't win are guaranteed advertising thanks to that 5k investment, so it doesn't appear that they're being ripped off. But have you seen this before? Excuse me. What are the pros and cons for the businesses and the club, and how do you value naming rights?
Well, I've not seen this before. I think it's a very innovative idea. The benefits to a potential sponsor is that for a relatively low investment, they get guaranteed exposure. in terms of they will get something, they will be able to get their products advertised at the ground. They've got a potential benefit on top of that. My slight reservation in respect of the position of the club is what happens if there's only 8 or 10 people who enter the competition. Do you have to give them all their money back,
fair
or
point,
do you simply say, well, we're still going to have the draw and we're only going to get 40 grand coming in from a sponsorship deal, which we think is worth 75. So there, that could be a negative. In terms of how do you value naming rights, they are unique assets. And again, I think in general, it's an issue which tends to be overplayed. And a lot of the deals that we see go through are linked to companies or organisations related to the club owner or somebody close to the club owner. So we've seen Everton in terms of their training ground. So that's been given to USM, which is part of Usmanov's empire at Scunthorpe. I went into Scunthorpe's account before we did the show, and they received over £2 million for the sponsorship. Now, for me, it's Glanford Park, and that's the trouble you've got. If you've got a ground which has been around for a few seasons, you're going to call it Glanford Park. Or if I'm going to Bolton, I'll still call it the Reebok because it always was the Reebok, although it's now the University of Bolton Stadium. So Scunthorpe's is called the Sands Venue Stadium, which happens to be a nightclub in Blackpool, which is owned by the club owner. So, is it a way of getting money into the club through a slightly different route? So trying to work out the value of these things, it's how do you value a painting? It's a unique asset, and ultimately it's a question of what somebody prepared to pay. So we've got things such as the Crown Oil Arena at Rochdale, Rochdale, Scotland. To me, I'm old school. Or the People's Pension Stadium at Crawley. You think, well, nobody, whoever says that. So do these brands get a huge amount in response apart from, occasionally on TV and radio, it gets announced as that being the name? Because I think from a fan's perspective, if it's an old name, then to the stadium, that they tend to stick with it because that's the nature of fandom.
Also, older Bolton fans will be listening to this going, it wasn't always a Reebok. It was Burnden Park before it was the Reebok.
Well, that was a different ground, though, wasn't it?
Well, that's the trouble, isn't it? When you move, if you move to a new ground, it's sometimes easier to use the new name, but fans will still use the old name. It's odd. Now, I feel sorry for. There's no time when you're more obsessed with football than between the age of probably 9 and 12, when you know everything about football. And I watched. We mentioned Jeff Stelling again. I watch scores come through on a midweek. It's like the Barrow Villa game, from the whatever hotel stadium it was. Yes. It's like I used to know. You used to know. You know the name of every ground. You know the name of every captain, of every kit, of every nickname, and now youngsters are just having to relearn it every year. And like you said, and it's the same as well when stands are renamed. It's always odd. They can call it the West Stand, the Trevor Brookings Stand. It's always the bit where you stood in all your life or sat in all your life. It's a strange one, but I think the important thing is, as you say, they rename. Like when Cheltenham were playing in the Johnny Rocks Stadium, it's Whaddon Road.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. But that's a really interesting question to end on, Thomas, so thank you for that. And if you have interesting questions or controversial questions or just questions for our next questions pod, I say our next questions pod, the way our waiting list is going, it could be quite some time, but give it a go, you never know. Questions at priceoffootball.com is what you want, and I shall hand you over to Kieran Maguire for our customary farewell.
Well, thanks as always, folks, for the feedback. If you are enjoying the show, there's always the option of Patreon. If you want to give for as little as £1 a month to give a monthly contribution to the show, but if you just want to get some good karma, give us some good karma. Go to the Apple Podcasts and give us a review. If you can give us 5 stars, helps us in the charts. We were lucky to have that really great interview with Tracy Crouch last week, and she would have done a bit of homework beforehand to see what is this podcast, and we do okay for ourselves for a niche show. Thanks again, and apart from that, we will see you on Thursday.
Yeah, it would be churlish of me to suggest that Kieran only mentioned the Patreon thing so he can afford the salmon when he goes to the gastropub before the Brentford game. But, if you want to contribute to our always free-to-air pod and make sure Kieran can eat properly, then please do so. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.